and she will get you guys started.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to be here with my collaborators, but also want to recognize that this work is part of a larger team effort. So here today, I'm Frances Harper. I'm an associate professor of STEM education at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And then my three university partners are here. Dr. Janine Alessier, Dr. Clara Lee Brown, and Dr. Francesca Starks. And then we also partnered with three community organizations in Knoxville, Muse Knoxville for the Love of Reading, and Centro Español de East Tennessee. And so our collaborators from those organizations are listed there as well. And we're going to share today some work that we did that was supported by the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement through a FEPIP grant program. And so we'll kind of jump right in. So the agenda for today is I'm going to give kind of a brief overview of the project. And then we have three modules that we developed with the funding that we received from NAFSCE. So we're going to give an overview of each of those modules. And then we had thought we were going to do breakout groups, but now we're going to do kind of a large group discussion to go into those modules in a little bit more depth. And then we'll have about 10 minutes at the end to kind of wrap things up. So as I mentioned, this work was funded by NAFSCE based on their family engagement core competencies that came out recently within the last year and a half or so. And so this project was funded to kind of develop innovative ways of integrating those core competencies into teacher preparation. And so our program, VOLTS, focuses on developing teachers' capacity for family and community engagement by leveraging the expertise that families and communities possess across teacher preparation programs. And so in order to do that, we developed, as I mentioned, three modules that we designed for teacher educators to use to introduce these core competencies from NAFSCE. And they were designed in such a way that they could be integrated into existing education preparation courses. And so you'll see as we start to talk a little bit, we all kind of have different areas of teacher preparation that we work within. So we wanted to make sure that these modules would be relevant across a wide range of courses that pre-service teachers often take. So I just wanted to say a little bit about why we call this project the Volunteer Teacher Spirit. So in creating our modules, we wove together practices of reflecting, connecting, and collaborating with our institution, the University of Tennessee's vision of the volunteer spirit. So the volunteer is our mascot here. And we characterize the volunteer spirit as a passion for promoting social change through conscientious service and leadership, but not through volunteerism or saviorism. So we really wanted to foster teachers who volunteer, who embrace that volunteer spirit, which we're calling the volunteer teacher spirit, so that they can listen to and learn from the diverse perspectives of community partners to support and co-lead collaborative efforts that truly benefit communities. So accordingly, our modules are designed to help advance equity by preparing educators who are ready to form deep partnerships with families built on listening, valuing, and honoring family strengths. So I also wanted to kind of situate this within NAFSCE's larger framework for thinking about preparing all teachers to practice family and community engagement. So within their framework model with their core competencies that came out recently, they offered this framework for systemic transformation of teacher preparation. And our work is situated sort of within these areas. So for a smaller project, we're not tackling the whole system at this point, but the FEPIP projects, which stand for Family Engagement, Educator Preparation, Innovation Projects, sort of highlighted different aspects of this work. And so we're focused on how we can make changes with the partners being educator preparation programs and families and community partners. So as we talk about the development of the modules, you'll see how we worked with community partners and families directly to guide teacher preparation. And so the work that we're doing is really influencing the redesign of programs by enhancing specific coursework that pre-service teachers are engaged with. So in conceptualizing our project, we drew on NAFSC's 8 core competencies that they proposed in the framework. So I'm not going to read those aloud to you. They will come up again as we kind of talk about the individual modules. But overall, competencies 1 and 2 are related to reflecting, so supporting educators to look inward, to develop cultural humility, embrace equity, and respect the value of diversity of families. And then core competencies 3 and 4 are related to connecting to families, building trusting relationships with families and communities. And then competencies 5 and 6 are about collaborating with families and community partners. And then competencies 7 and 8 are taking on more of a co-leadership role to advocate for systems change and take part in lifelong learning. So for our 3 modules, we focused on competencies 1 through 6. So though, as I mentioned, we decided to design 3 modules. So you can see here just an overview of how those modules kind of play out across the core competencies. Our first module focusing on reflecting 1 and 2, and then modules 2 and 3 focusing on connecting and collaborating, first with families in module 2 and then with communities in module 3. So these modules are designed to be either integrated across a series of courses, or they could be used to teach a single standalone family engagement course. But our recommendation is to think more about infusing some of the strategies from these modules across the teacher preparation program. So I'm going to turn things over now to Dr. Starks and Dr. Brown, who are going to share with you more about Module 1.
Thank you, Francis, Dr. Harper. My name is Francesca Starks, and I'll be talking about the first portion of Module 1, so Part 1. And the title of Module 1 is Reflect to Engage, because there's a focus on supporting students to examine their inward development around cultural humility, encouraging them to embrace equity and respect as it relates to engaging with students and their families and the broader community. So first, we'll talk a little bit about the partnership for Part 1 of Module, or for the entire thing of Module 1. And that included 2 professors from the University of Tennessee. That was myself, Francesca Starks, and Dr. Clara Brown, who you will hear from regarding Part 2 of Module 1 in a few moments. We also partnered with Muse Knoxville, which is Knoxville's children's STEAM museum. And their mission is to inspire and empower all children through transformative learning experiences, through a variety of hands-on and inquiry-based experiences. And the reason why we partnered with Muse Knox was not only because of their mission and how it aligns with what we value in terms of collaboration with families and communities, but also because we formed a relationship with them, and they have a long-standing history with working with in partnership with the University of Tennessee. And so that was very instrumental in the success of the design of these modules as well. So specifically, we work with the executive director, Allison Comer, as well as the director of education and exhibits, Lee Robinson. So in terms of the design for the modules, as Dr. Harper mentioned earlier, we focused in Module 1 specifically on NAFSC's core competencies, number 1, respecting, honoring, and valuing families, and number 2, embracing equity through family engagement. So there was this intentional focus on supporting students with the self-work that has to be done before they seek to build relationships and collaborate with families. The overall goal for the modules was to learn strategy for pre-service educators to learn strategies to practice family engagement and to become involved in their communities. And then specifically as it relates to module 1, we wanted to support pre-service educators to examine how their personal identities and their experiences mattered for their perceptions of the possibilities and the responsibility of familial engagement. And also we wanted to provide opportunities for them to practice strategies for cultivating meaningful relationships with students and their families. And we did that by way of designing specific activities that would allow them to foster those relationships and really get out and practice with the individuals that we want to support. Slide. Are you all seeing any movement in the slides?
I think Dr. Harper might be
She frozen?
froze. Yeah.
Okay. I guess we'll give it a moment to come back online.
Technology is very frustrating, isn't it?
It is.
It can be. Want to just keep
Um,
going from the slide?
Yeah.
So I can continue talking. I don't know if the slides would be, I don't know. I was trying to see in the chat if anyone wanted to say welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us. And if anyone has any preliminary questions, I think this might be a good time for us to answer those while we wait. I can also move on, with the presentation. Is that what we would prefer, team? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we talked, the last thing we mentioned was the design and the overall objectives. And so it's important to mention that in terms of the partnership, we did not want to do this work in a silo of university professors and what we kind of thought would be best. Even with the community partners, we also thought it was important to pull in the people we want to positively impact, who are families and students, right? And so while we had a preliminary design for what we thought the module should look like, we also wanted to do some data collection to inform our further design and kind of revision of the modules. And so that was done through a through a family literacy night that we hosted for parents and students. And that was hosted by Muse Knoxville. We had upwards of 30 families in attendance, and we were able to provide books for them. We read Dream Street. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that lovely children's book, but we provided Dream Street dinner. We also provided supervised play. So the parents had an opportunity to converse with the university professors and other teachers in small groups while their children were being supported and watched by some of the staff at the Muse. And so, oh, great. Okay. Next slide. And now you'll be able to see a couple of the photos we took at the event. I don't know. So back one, Francis. Yep, perfect. So as I mentioned, the Family Literacy Night was hosted by Muse Knoxville. And this was also a really important opportunity for parents to see what was available in the community. We learned that when people showed up, they really hadn't even had an opportunity to visit the Muse. They weren't aware of all of the available programming, the reduced admission that's available to parents and families. And so that was another good thing that came out of offering this family literacy night. Our goal was to solicit parents' perspectives about literacy engagement and to really understand how do they want teachers to engage with them as a parent of a student, right? And so we asked questions along those lines. And what we learned is that, of course, parents use innovative strategies to support their children's educational efforts and their well-being. But we also learned that they are seeking additional strategies to help support their children's literacy development specifically. We learned that they are willing to work with teachers and with school systems, and that they invite teachers to kind of invite them into their classrooms to support their children in different ways, and that they really value the opportunity to fellowship with other parents in that space. That was something that we heard over and over again, is that they really appreciated the community and the time to talk with other parents around problem solving and kind of just thinking of different ways to better engage their children around literacy.
And Dr. Starks, you had a question from someone asking about if the module that you're talking about could be adapted for educator preparation, could be adapted for teachers who are already in the field.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. I honestly don't know that it would take that much change in the module in order for it to be applicable to in-service teachers. I think that, you know, I guess from our context, we're thinking if we can preemptively support teachers with having this mindset before they go into classrooms, that's great, but certainly this would be available and appropriate for in-service educators as well. I think that's part of why we also wanted it to be publicly available, and the grant has allowed us to do that so that people can access it, you know, beyond just the university space. Thank you for the question. Are we able to advance the slide at all? Or okay, and then next, please. Perfect. So as we mentioned, the objective for Module 1 is really focused on this self-interrogation before stepping into the space of working with families and communities. And so one of the activities that we designed in order to meet that objective was called a culture quilt. And so it's an opportunity for students to represent, for pre-service educators, to represent their familial customs, their traditions and ways of life, where each square uses words, pictures, symbols, or other objects to represent an important aspect of their culture, including customs, tradition, language, etc. And this process of kind of going inward to examine who they are and what that means to them, we are hoping will translate into a broader understanding and valuing of the cultures of their students, right? Understanding that we come from somewhere and have a background that means something to us and really impacts how we make meaning of the world, and that is also true for students, right? And so some of the benefits of the culture quilt, it just helps with celebrating diversity and inclusivity. When people share out with their culture quilts, they form cross-cultural understandings. They're able to build bridges, enhance creativity, community building. All of those things are positive aspects of participating in this activity. And really, it just helps to foster understanding, appreciation, and unity among a group of diverse individuals and communities. Next slide, please. The second activity was more literacy focused, but really could be adapted to any subject. And it's a student-focused literacy inventory. And it addresses objective 2, which is to cultivate meaningful relationships with students and their families. And one of the important ways or preliminary stages of doing that is really getting to know students and listening to them. And so this activity engages prospective teachers to engage in one conversation with 3 students in an effort to become more familiar with their in-school and out-of-school activities and interests, their homes and communities, and cultural knowledge bases. And so we encourage prospective teachers to use the interest inventory as a guide where they can ask questions such as, what do you enjoy about reading? What do you like or dislike? What types of things do you read, listen to, or watch at home? And the point of this activity or this process is really just for teachers to listen, right? To listen and to be able to learn what students are already doing and to leverage that information for what they want students to learn. So to make those connections so that learning feels like a holistic experience and something that's not kind of segregated to the school space. And now I will turn it over to Clara, Dr. Brown, who will talk a little bit more about the second part of Module 1 and how that design looked.
Hey, Dr. Starks, this is Clara Brown, Clara Lee Brown. I teach students, pre-service teachers who want to be teaching English as a second language, and here in UTK. So I was charged with to further develop the part 2 of the module 1. So the focus of my part of module was about embracing equity and when they are engaged with the communities and their families. So one of the most important thing for me to think about is we talk about diversity inclusion all day long, and especially in the ESL area, that's what we talk. However, a lot of times we fall into rhetorical practices, right? So that I wanted to really emphasize we have to recognize what communities bring to the table. And Dr. Stark's unit about honoring and valuing what communities bring to and their knowledge, accumulated knowledge in their cultures. So although we know glass half empty, half full, if we are not very retrospective about our own learning, it's very easy to fall into glass half empty. So it was very, very important to lay the groundwork about perspective, pre-service teachers, start from recognizing the communities and families, their strengths. And so that ultimately, those teachers, when they step into their own classrooms and practice anti-bias, anti-racist, and equity forward and teaching for all diverse families. I guess we can go to the next one. So I try to visualize, actually this is no, step down or step up a process. It's a really, ongoing process, right? But I want to see, as Nevsky talking about perspective taking. So we have to be intentional about, we reject the, half glass half empty, reject the notion, the perspective, and taking on strength-based and then community advocating, that sort of perspective taking. So we have to start from there. Always we have to come back to that and then examine our own, including, not only all of us, but our perspective teachers. And then, but they need to interrogate, they need to examine where they're coming from, because, very, how do I say, we always say no to explicit racism, prejudice. However, sometimes, when it comes to very detailed or not so black and white areas of, racist perspective, sometimes we are not very careful about. So interrogating, examining is very important. From there, we have to hone in our own skills in terms of, okay, from there, so now realize I have some shortcomings, but I really want to develop. So how do we want to go from there? And then when they develop something, they always have to go back to, what have you adapted? And then is there anything I could add more or modify it? So you just wanted to show it's an ongoing process, going through all of it, but perspective taking and intention about it is really important. Next one, please. So as we all know, maybe go back one more about theoretical basis. I don't want to talk about, let's say everybody knows, but just wanted to touch on the issues related to we always practice from a theory into practice, so that funds of knowledge, what community have and know, that could be always where we can start, right? And also everybody knows culturally relevant, responsive, culturally inclusive practices. But these are the main anchors when I develop the activities for this second part of the module 1. Next one, please. Okay, thank you. So especially I'm dealing with the English as second language speaking communities and families. I want students to understand the immigrant experiences, especially all those who come to students, my students, the pre-service teachers have to deal with the immigrant children and families. So related to that immigrant experiences, again, start from interrogating, examining activities. And I've taught many years. What I learned from my own teaching and dealing with my own university students is that they really cerebrally understand what immigrant families going through, but they don't necessarily have a deeper level of understanding. So I try to devise the activity, and then so that they can anticipate and they can imagine sort of challenges this family encounter or going through. And then not only encountering, but anticipating the challenges and difficulties these families go through. But then again, go to the next level of, and so what type of resources available in the community so they can connect those two dots. And I think I invite all the opinions and perspectives, insight from the people who visited here. And then, so yes, please send this to Dr. Harper. But I think it's very, very important for us to think about immigrant experiences. And especially, again, there's a strengths-based perspective taking really tells us that, hopes and dreams of these families and their resilience and tenacity, how important is that? So while recognizing, we also have to recognize types of suffering they go through. It is really, when you are teaching English second language or bilingual children, the daily suffering is real, and that's what they really go through. So while we recognizing, but also at the same time, we have to think about what are the ways for us to help. And next slide, please. Is it frozen? Okay, next one. So again, so another activity is more focusing more on about, what can they do as an individual teacher, and especially teachers who are dealing with the diversity in terms of culture, language, and race, and they have to wear many different hats. So here they introspective about what perspective I have, what can I do, recognizing families and problems of their hopes and dreams and tenacities and resilience. However, this one is really focusing on what can they do, right? So coming up with a really tangible things. So I think someone asked about whether or not this can be applied to a pre-service. I think Dr. Harper mentioned at the beginning, one of the objectives of this whole project is so that we can develop this modules we are going to implement in our own classes. But then again, so again, this is about changing the system one step at a time, right? So we can suggest to the whole faculty in our department and say going into that way, we are really implementing this perspective taking practice into all areas of teacher education programs at UTK. So that so I felt like in talking in my own teaching, students so we talk about diversity all day long, right? And they're highly sensitive, empathetic, but yet again, in talking, the unexamined, unrecognized, subtle, very subtle, racist attitude would come out, and maybe microaggression. So I try to put it on how to talk to, because we don't want to ever walking on tiptoe around on important issues. We can deal with the important difficult subject when we talk, but at the same time we wanted to be competently deal with that instead of doing that, but at the same time very respectful manners. So I try to concentrate on when teachers are talking to the parents and the community. So they should be able to competently to talk about difficult subjects and then talk competently. So I came up with this activities so they can monitor their speech when they talk, right? So that this what this activity is all about. We can come back to. I think it's important, and teachers when they have all the good intentions, maybe sometimes will come out not the right way. So practice through this sort of a dialoguing can really raise the level of in-service teachers' competences. So we can talk about later. I don't need to go into details about this. Next slide, please. I think this will be my last one. Oh, okay. So it's kind of a little corny kind of topic, but then again, okay. So we come up with the activities and doing all those things. Again, I am matching with the one of the sub objectives with the activities. And then, so we want to see whether or not what we do is really following the spirit and to the T. And then, so then, we're talking about problems, how do we approach to the communities and all that, and also step further into looking into the community and because we are to utilize everything is out there. I think the innovativeness about this whole project is about integrating all components in our community as well, including the higher ed, so that so we are well connected instead of working a very compartmentalized way in our own, connecting all the possible dots out there. So and then so maybe provide a further critical perspective in terms of what's out there, but then again look into and what in terms of their mission statement, what they try to do, what are the initiatives out there, whether or not they're really working hard to promote racial and social justice, and then maybe identify some gaps related to that, and then but that way, and even pre-service teachers when they become their own teachers, and they can work with a very clear-eyed kind of approach, not only working with the parents, but working with the community as well. In that way, as Dr. Stark's talking about getting the unity, I think that's the key. So we do our own part, but simultaneously working with the other stakeholders. I think that's the sort of the summing up with my part. Thank you. And I guess next one goes to the Dr. Harper, right?
So thank you, Dr. Brown. Of course, I never have internet issues and my internet is out, so I'm hotspotting from my phone. So hopefully we won't have any issues with that. So I'm going to share a little bit about Module 2, which, as I mentioned, focused on core competencies 3 and 5, which are really about connecting and collaborating with families. So this module was developed by myself and with Beth Schoonover, who is the founder and director of a nonprofit organization called For the Love of Reading, which aims to expand minds and hearts through the pure joy of reading. There's a typo there. So this, as I mentioned, this module design is 3 and 5. So here you can read kind of what those are. So the focus on building trusting reciprocal relationships with families, and then co-constructing learning opportunities with families. So this module design is set up a little bit differently. There are 4 activities that guide pre-service teachers towards developing competencies in these 2 areas to kind of do a larger project. So the overall goals of the module are to support teachers, pre-service, or it could be in-service teachers, to learn strategies that will help them build relationships with families. And the focus there is on learning from families about how they would naturally engage with academic content in their lives. So by taking a learner role, teachers can start to appreciate the ways that families are already engaged in academic knowledge production in their homes and communities. And then pre-service teachers will learn those strategies based on what they've learned from families about how they can co-construct learning opportunities with families that will sort of draw on children's natural tendencies to engage with academic content. So the specific example that we developed was for mathematics, with the idea that a lot of times we don't think about mathematics within kind of these cultural contexts. So we wanted to provide a model for that. So in order to co-develop this module with families, we had 2 kind of co-development activities. So the first was that university partners themselves engaged in a family math walk with Black and Latina mothers. So first we went out and did the activity that we would hope pre-service teachers or in-service teachers would also do with families to get feedback from those mothers in how we might guide teachers to connect with them in particular ways. So this first part of the co-development was really on that aspect of connecting with families and starting to build those reciprocal relationships. So activity 1 of the module supports pre-service teachers or teachers to look at an example from our own family math walk with parents. And so the module sort of walks you through how to introduce what family math walks are using some different resources, and then to look at this picture of a mural that came up in our conversation in our math walk that we did with Black and Latina mothers. And then first, they'll think about, like the teachers will think about what math do they see, right, in this community image. And then they listen to an audio recording of the mothers talking about the mathematics that they see in this image. And so they then kind of reflect on that discussion that the mothers had and how that differs from the mathematics that they were noticing as they think about preparing for their own family math walk. So then the second activity is actually making a plan for the family math walk. So the teachers recruit a group of parents or families and plan for their own math walk. And so there are some guiding sort of prompts that they can think about in terms of what they're going to do when they're out with parents in the community to learn about the ways in which mathematics is already a natural part of children's everyday lives. And these were adopted from another project called Teach Math.
And Dr. Harper, you had
And though for the
you have a question in the chat asking about when you're working with these pre-service teachers, do their cooperating teachers and school sites receive similar information?
So far we've been doing this activity in conjunction with schools that host family STEM events. And so the school, it's a school university partnership in that regard. So next semester will be the first time that we're trying it kind of where teachers are bringing in and recruiting their own families and parents. So yes, like including like the cooperating teacher in that conversation would be really important so that they might help the pre-service teacher to identify families that would be a good fit for invitation to do the family walks. And then in terms of in-service teachers, right, every mother that we talked to would have been thrilled if their child's teacher had reached out and asked them to do this kind of activity with them. So I think it is something that I'm hearing families would love to do with teachers. So then for activity 3, the pre-service teachers or teachers actually do their math walk with families and then share what they've learned as they start to develop a co-learning activity for teachers and families. So that brings us to kind of the co-development activities for the second part, which are really focused on collaborating with families to create learning opportunities for children. And so in order to co-develop the pre-service teacher module with families, the university partners started by designing a mathematics activity that was based on the community walk that we did with the mothers. And then we met again with the mothers and they provided feedback on how we might improve the activity to better support children's and families' learning experiences. So that resulted in the fourth activity, which is actually to develop a take-home family math activity. So in this, the pre-service teachers would start to consider, so they first look at the activity that we developed, and then they look at the parent feedback that we were given. So this is just a snapshot of some of the feedback that parents gave on how we might better enhance the take-home activity to make it more accessible and interesting for families in that classroom. And then they develop their own take-home activity. And then, of course, a natural extension of that would be to reach out to the families that they went on the math walk with and ask for feedback as well. So the idea of this is really moving beyond this idea of worksheets as homework, right? And how can we more actively engage families in doing math or doing reading or science in the home space in ways that they are already doing, right? So something that could be a learning opportunity for the whole family. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over now to Alicia.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Module 3, which combine competencies 4 and 6. So that's talking about fostering community partnership and then linking family and community engagement to learning and development. So talking about the community partner that I worked with, this was a partnership between the University of Tennessee and then Centro Hispano, and they are an organization here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they serve the greater East Tennessee region, and their purpose is to really lift up the voices of our Hispanic and Latino families. And so they were a perfect dovetail for this specific module because they work with families in schools. They have long-standing trusting relationships with those within that community and also the broader community. And in addition, they also work within all of our community schools. So those are our local institutions that provide holistic services to students and families and predominantly Title I schools. They also are responsible for doing education within their organization. So that allows them to construct their own curriculum, and they have a lot of experience hearing about the lived experiences of teachers and families, and they know how families struggle with interfacing with teachers. And so there is a desire within that community to really make those connections for our pre-service teachers to make change in the future. And ooh, I think we lost Dr. Harper again. Okay. The partnership, so you can see more about Centro Hispano and their mission there. And then if you'll jump ahead to the next one. So our challenge was to really get the thoughts of community partners here locally in Knox County, but then also to gather those parent and family perspectives from across the district as well. And that process was really interesting in that we were able to get together to talk about who are the kind of community partners that we want to identify, and then what's the kind of setting that would really allow our parents to interface with one another. And, there was a lot of challenges with that process, whether that was identifying the time and place, note-taking, getting language skills. It really took a lot of additional thought that was unexpected, but the results of what we came up with were really fascinating. We were able to link in a lot of what our community partners were seeing when they interfaced with education partners, but simultaneously for Centro to be able to share what their lived experiences of their families were when they worked with teachers in schools. And so what we came up with was several activities and guided scenarios for our pre-service teachers. And y'all, I'm going fast because we are excited to hear your thoughts and opinions on these things that we've created. But briefly, ours is split into two parts. So our first part is looking at activities about community asset mapping. And we also looked at building accessible connections to resources and to building trust and connections with families. These are often aspects that are left out of the curriculum or aren't given enough time and dedication, because when parents were interfacing in the community or with community partners were interfacing with teachers, they felt that it was often the first time that they were exposed to some of these concepts, and they really wanted to build those in. And so not only did we come up with these activities, but we also wrote some scenarios so that we could talk with our pre-service teacher. Imagine that you are in X, Y, and Z situation. How might you react? So they can start to think about those things before they actually are in the classroom. And then with part two, we wanted to link family and community to learning and development. And so our activity was around data. So data is something that's often very much talked about with our pre-service teachers, but our parents aren't exposed to that. So for a teacher to say, hey, your child scored X, but actually, our classroom is at Y. For some parents, that might be the first time that they're exposed to those kinds of data and scores. And so how can you help to make that data more understandable? And then you can also see we built our activities around sort of a light, medium, and deep dive, so that depending on where the pre-service teachers were in their learning, that they were able to plug in. So for someone, I teach some of our new courses with teachers, that would really be that light, very brand new individual. But when you're thinking about teachers who maybe already are in the field or about to go into the field, that's when they can hit those deep dive moments. But y'all can look more into these activities. I know I went fast through them, but you can look more at them on the website. And we would love to get your thoughts as we reflect on each of the modules.
So I know from some of the questions that have been asked, some of you have been kind of perusing around the website a little bit already, which we think is great. So we wanted to start the conversation with just kind of what do you notice and what do you wonder about sort of these three modules that we've shared today. And if you raise your hand, if you prefer to ask your question or share your noticing aloud, then Kayla can give you access to talk as well. But you're also welcome to put things in the Q&A or the chat.
think one of the earlier questions was asking about if this would be applicable for just our pre-service teachers, or if it could also be used for those who are also in the field. I think that's true across all of our modules, that we hope that it can be modified for where teachers are in the learning continuum.
Since that question is not sparking, oh, here we go. We have a noticing from Craig. Noticing a common theme of respect, cultivation between school and home. So that is great for us to hear, because I think that's what we were all aiming for with this. So the other thing that we had hoped to kind of discuss with all of you is thinking about the potential for these modules to kind of impact this idea of interconnectedness in teacher preparation. And so we're wondering kind of what potential do you see for these modules to kind of bring together the way that we're preparing teachers for family and community engagement in interconnected ways. So as Craig mentioned, across the school and the home, but other stakeholders are also playing a role in that. And if you have thoughts of what we're overlooking and how we think about these modules, we'd also love to hear that from you.
We have a question from Anita Armstrong in the Q&A. Have you measured student knowledge and attitudes after completing the training modules? Do you have feedback from them about the learning experience and how it impacted them? So we have not piloted these yet. We will, Dr. Harper, I don't know if you want to talk more about the course that you have coming up in the spring, but Anita, that's something that we're hoping to do in the next couple of months.
So we have a little bit of additional funds from NAFSCI to continue doing the work. So this past year really focused on the co-development of these modules with community partners and families. And so I think each of us has a plan to use one or part of a module in the courses that we teach. So we would have children's literacy courses, we would have, ESL methods courses, we would have the introductory education course, as well as the math methods. And then I'm teaching a standalone family and community engagement course in the spring where I'm going to use all three of the modules. And so we do have some plans to look at beliefs and attitudes kind of before and after that course, but also when the modules are integrated into existing courses.
We also had a question about the feedback from pre-service teachers and families and what the supports look like at a secondary level. So the feedback from our pre-service teachers, we haven't quite gotten that yet because we're going to be implementing that in the spring. But does anyone else have feedback on supports at the secondary level?
So I've taught kind of uniquely across elementary and secondary context in math education. And I've done the family math walks with secondary pre-service teachers as well. So I do think a lot of these things could be adapted, right, for the secondary, or maybe not even with that much adaptation, right, could be used in the secondary context as well. I think the module 1 especially, right, doesn't really need any adaptation because it's really focused on your own self-reflection. And then, as I mentioned, the community walk can be done with a lens towards secondary content. And then I don't know, Janine, if you have any thoughts about that, but I think in partnering with communities and connecting with community organizations, right, that's applicable across grade levels as well.
Absolutely, it is. And I think that this is something that we hope would be able to be implemented at all levels, even in our early childhood sphere. connecting with families in a culturally competent way that really gives families a voice and choice at the table is something that we hope is what the future looks like for education.
I also taught at high school for a long time. Actually, I think Dr. Starks, you mentioned that after the feedback from the families from when we did the family nights, I think parents always sort of they long for this connection, their connection to the school. So in elementary there are so many events and happenings, with the parents and the school. But as their children grow older, especially at the secondary high school level, just maybe once a year, back to school night, that sort of things. But I think it's the bringing parents to school is definitely can doable. Not only that, make parents feel they're really connected to, and then teachers at the school care about their children. So we could do additional family nights for ESL parents or parents, any parents, the parents of the diversities, and they can do that and have some more increased frequency, if you will, the opportunities or space where teachers at the schools and then parents of the students sort of kind of intersect and meet together and share ideas. And from then on, we can do even better. So definitely doable at the secondary level, I think.
And we're engaged in kind of family engagement work beyond this particular project as well. So, you are welcome to check out our broader body of work, and hopefully we'll find that helpful also. So thank you all for being here. The website information is here, and you're welcome to contact any of us directly.
Thank you so much, ladies. That was very informative and I really loved it myself. And again, like they said, their slides will be in the WOVA app under their session that you can see at your own convenience, and the recordings as well will be on the app as well. Well, and will be sent out the end of today after we conclude all of our virtual sessions. So thank you so much, ladies. You guys have a nice day. And to the attendees, we're getting ready to get ready for our last session of the day at 1:30 to wrap up our virtual day 2. And we will see you guys later. Thank you.
Thank you.